Hello, welcome back to the channel and the last video for 2023. And today we're putting all of what we've learned over the last few weeks together to actually reap the benefits of this wonderful swinging of the golf club around your wrists, understanding that that is the heart of the movement and everything else is actually happening to support and increase and speed up the movement. But the basic control of the golf club is all in your hands and wrists and not, as a lot of people are telling you, in your body. We are not controlling the club face by turning our body. So to just get the last kind of deep dive, I want to first of all show you some of the graphs we've got out of the hack motion if we're looking at all three axes at the same time. That means the hinging of the wrists up and down, the rotating of the lower arms right and left, and also the deviation in the wrists that droop up and down, the tilting up and down or hinging up and down of the wrist during the swing. So to be able to control the ball flight, you've got to be able to control path and you've got to be able to control face angle. And what the wrists and arms are doing in the swing is controlling both. The green line and the purple line that we're predominantly going to be looking at here, the green line is the flexion of the wrist, which is going to close the wrist as it goes more into flexion here and also move the club more behind me onto a flatter plane. The main reason that we're doing this, and also in the purple line, rotating the club behind us, is to get the club behind the ball so that I can come down and hit into the back of the ball. We want the club head to be moving down the target line, and you can see this neutral path that the club head has here, which is confirmed by the swing direction of 0.5. And also the face is also neutral, square to the target, also confirmed by the face angle of 0.5. So you can see how that is causing the golf ball to just fly off at right angles to the mat, which is exactly what we're looking for. But there's obviously a very complicated number of movements which have happened to allow that to actually happen. And if we take the club at the swing back to the beginning, you can actually see as we start, there are a number of angles in the address position from which we're moving away from. The club head is square to the target, but the wrist is an extension. The club face is square to the target. There is no rotation in the lower arms. The deviation in the wrist, where you can see, which means that the lead wrist is pointing down towards the floor. That will have a greater effect really on the direction that the club leaves the club face. But if you have a fitted golf club, then that should not make any difference. If I come back to around about the same reading at impact, so the ulnar deviation you can actually see here, and also at the moment of impact here is very, very similar. You're not really got an awful lot of difference. It's 20 degrees at impact and it's just over 20 degrees and the address position. So it's the other two lines which are basically responsible for opening, closing the club face, swinging the club back behind you and into the ball. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at how are we controlling them. Well, the first thing is as I start to pick the club up at the beginning of the golf swing, you can see that there isn't an awful lot happening in either of these lines, but then pretty quickly the lower arm starts to rotate and the wrist starts to go almost at the same time into flexion. So you can think that the rotation of your wrist is also helping you to go into flexion. And this happens for the first part of the golf swing. But as the club then starts to move up, as the rotation slows down, the inertia of the club pulling my arms up will actually also cause the wrist to go into extension. And that is opening the club face. So you can see that despite the lower arm rotation, which is quite dramatic, if you look here, I've got 60 degrees of lower arm rotation. But because of 13 degrees of flexion, that's a change of almost 30 degrees in the opposite direction, that is actually holding the club face square and neutral in the backswing. And if I were not to have that, then the club face at this point would be pointing somewhere out behind me, totally flared open. But these two different movements are helping me to control the club face in the backswing by closing the face with the flexion of the wrist and opening the face with the rotation of the lower arms. And at this point in the backswing, where I'm starting to become more passive in the arm swing, the club is basically pulling my arms up. That is when the wrist goes back into extension and the rotation slows down. So you can actually see, if you look in the video, how the club face here opens up at the top, and even at the very top is still opening to the point where you can see in the graph that I'm going from 0 up to almost 4 degrees of extension at the top of the swing, which is very difficult to see in the video. The video would say that I'm still a little bit in flexion. It seems a very straight lead wrist. But the graph is showing me that there is extension there. And this extension has actually gone further into the downswing. It's become even more, and only then, as the lower arms start to rotate back to the balls, trying to square the club up again, the club face is also going, or the wrists are also going into flexion, also closing the club face. So you can see that relatively open club face here is closing up, pointing back towards the camera a little bit. And if it were not to do this, if I were to just let the club to come down from here around my wrist angle without any rotation, then I'd be hitting the ball at right angles to the target line. So there's got to be around about 90 degrees of rotation now in my lower arms and in my wrist in order to get that face back square. At the same time, by dropping the club, by allowing the arms to fall without getting the club to get steeper, I'm actually creating this neutral path, which is going to help me to swing the club through the golf ball and from behind the golf ball. So you can see now flexion in the wrist has gone to over 20 degrees, really bending that wrist back. The lower arm rotation is really speeding up here. It's really flying. If you look at just under the eye in the video in the bottom right hand corner, you can see that number of 23. That means 23 milliseconds before I hit the ball. So you can see the rapid rate of rotation which is happening through impact and continuing after impact. So this is the reason that not every golf ball goes straight. If you get this timing off, then there is no wonder that even the top tour professionals have a lot of dispersion with the golf ball. And you can see that this has been well timed. Again, looking at swing direction and face angle, both at 0.5, we've got this neutral path through the ball, the club head traveling down the target line, down the middle of the mat there, the club face square, the ball just basically leaving the extension of the mat due to this coordination of extension and flexion in the wrist and rotation of the lower arm. And that is basically how you square the golf club and get the neutral path in the downswing. So if we wanted to shape the ball, the simplest way to do that is to just change the face angle relative to the path. So it would be simplistic but true to allow everything to stay the same with the exception of the green line. If I work on the green line, allowing my wrist to go into more extension through the ball, you can see at the moment of impact, I have 7 degrees of flexion. If I were to change that to 5, 4, 3, 2 degrees, even no flexion, then I would have the face open to the path and the ball would make
a curve to the right of the target. If I were to set myself up slightly to the left of the target, I'd be hitting a fade. So allowing the hand to go into extension a little earlier in the downswing will allow me to fade the ball. On the contrary, by not allowing it to go into extension as quickly, by holding the flexion a little in the downswing and setting myself up to the right of the target, I could get the golf ball to curve to the left of the target because relative to the path, the club face would be closed. Now, of course, you could also do this with the swing and stay set up parallel to the target. You would do that by starting the body rotation here earlier. Doing that would bring the club on a steeper angle down to the ball. It wouldn't be able to flatten out as much. You would come down steeper to the ball and slightly from the outside. And on the contrary, if we wanted to hit the golf ball from the inside and the path from in to out, then I could delay the body rotation a bit longer, let the club come down, and then with this delayed rotation through the ball, the club would be coming more from the inside, and I wouldn't do anything different with my wrist release. And if you keep doing these drills, you will actually be able to kind of feel what your wrists are doing during the swing. And I would definitely recommend that you just try and get a feel for how the club head is moving around you, how you are controlling the club head, basically through feeling its weight and where it is in the swing, and how the weight of the club is affecting your wrist angle through the swing. And if you do that, you will slowly but surely be able to control the flight of the ball and get the golf ball to dance. Get it to do what you want it to do. And of course, once you actually have a feeling for how it feels to fade a ball and draw a ball, then you will start to be able to better define the feeling for hitting the golf ball straight.
So as I touched on there, the benefits are just immeasurable. Not only are you going to get a more consistent shot, a more solid strike on the golf ball, a lot of these numbers that you've always wanted to see out of launch monitors, but you are also going to start to control ball flight. And you're going to do this by primarily just controlling one element of your wrist action, and that is the extension and flexion of the wrist during the swing. If we look at that in the hack motion, that basically just means that if I want to get the feeling of the club face being open and fading the ball, I want the feeling of the hand going into extension a little earlier and having a little bit more extension at the top of the swing. On the contrary, if I want to get the opposite spin on the golf ball, for me as a right-handed player, a draw, then I want to have a little bit more pronation at the top of the swing. I want to get a little bit more flexion, not quite as much extension, and then I'm going to have the feeling of turning and holding that extension, not in that I am physically holding it, but in that I am actually allowing the turn of my body to be forceful enough and allowing the club to kind of stay behind me as I pull through the golf ball. And this is totally adequate to change the numbers that we need in the club face without making massive changes on the plane. So if you look at the swing here and we then have a look at the numbers, you're going to see that that as a gentle draw is giving me a little less extension at the top of the swing and a little more extend or flexion in the impact position. On the contrary, if I just want to fade one now, not a massive difference if you look at the actual swing, but if you look at the numbers and the graphs, you can see here a little more extension at the top and a little less flexion at impact. And that's all there is to it. So how do you do that? Well, It's all about understanding the swing again and the feeling that you have in your swing. As I say, around about chest height, this is where you should be going passive in the swing. And all that's happening when I am drawing the ball is that I am not allowing the lead wrist to go into quite as much extension, almost keeping it a little bit, the feeling of it bowing backwards a little bit there. If you actually look at it, we're talking about a couple of degrees. This isn't massive, but I can feel it. Similarly, as I drop the club, I really am allowing the club head to drop. And you can see by doing that, that will actually help me to get more flexion in the lead wrist as the club is coming down. I am not then holding it, but I am actually increasing the extension of the downswing and then releasing the extension naturally through the golf ball. We don't need the club face to be totally shut now at impact. We just need to get a couple of degrees difference between the path and the face, and that's perfectly adequate for me to be getting the golf ball to move in the sky in the way that I want it to do. On the other hand, if I'm wanting to fade the golf ball, it's exactly the opposite. As I get to the top, I'm really relaxing, almost allowing my trail hand to pick the club up a little bit at the top, which just gets the feeling of the lead wrist going into extension. And then as I come down, I get a little bit more of the feeling of pulling the club down. It will bring the club on a little bit steeper plane, but then releasing the club out through the ball. Now, obviously, it might have the feeling of flipping, and this is where it would be a good idea to get your hands on one of these hack motion devices so that you can make sure that you're not overdoing it. But you should be able to see it in ball flight. And if we're quite honest, if you've been practicing this for a few weeks now, I think you're going to start to feel the difference in these swings. Don't worry if you have a feeling on the cut that you're getting a little bit steeper in the downswing. That's perfectly okay. Don't be worried if you get the feeling of getting a little bit flatter if you're drawing the golf ball. But one of the big advantages once you've been doing this for a little while is that you actually get a feeling for how your wrist is moving in both versions, and therefore it's far more simple to just say, well, let's just smack one down the middle here. And there you're going to come back to your normal kind of values at the top of the swing and the impact that you have when you were practicing. And this is really being able to see these numbers gives you so much confidence. Not only is the ball doing what you're expecting it to do, but you are actually able to see that you are able to consciously control the flight just by creating these numbers in the hack motion graphs. To round that all off then, I want you to then stop thinking about what you're doing in the golf swing and start imagining ball flight. I have a very nice story of Eamon Darcy coming into the pro shop during a tournament when I was an assistant and telling us stories of how he was fighting as a young professional, playing the game because his friends and colleagues were able to shape the ball at will. His father was also a golf professional. He says, Eamon, with your golf swing, all this standing closed is not going to help you. Standing open is not going to help you. You've just got to imagine what the ball should do. Your hands will do the rest. And if you can remember Eamon Darcy's swing, which looked very, very handsy, he was able to control it simply by seeing it. And this isn't some kind of magic. This is a simple association that your brain will make. If every time you have more extension and more release in the swing and the ball goes from left to right, your brain will associate that movement with that shot pattern. And the same if you're drawing the golf ball, it will feel a little bit more flexion, it will feel the flexion coming down, and it will watch the golf ball bend in the opposite direction. So you should just be able to watch the target, imagine the ball flight, and your body will automatically get the golf ball moving in the direction that you want it. But this is something you've got to train. You've got to get used to it. Another nice little fade in here. I can see the ball in the sky, a little bit higher than it was with the draw and just fading back into the target. You should be able to feel one of the directions is easier, one of them is more difficult. If that's the case, then lucky you, because it means in pressure situations, you can basically shut out one side of the golf course because you know the ball is always going to be bending in one direction because that's your shot shape. That's the shape that your hands want to hit. Hope you liked it. Hope it works for you. If it does, smash that like button. If you would like to become a patron to the channel, I will leave a link below. A big final thank you to all of my patrons this season. Final only because this is the last video of the season. I'm now going to have a little bit of a break over the Christmas period. We'll see you all in the new year. Until then, have a very good Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you in 2024.